All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of my East Coast Fitness Podcast, and I'm your host, Mark Lewis. And today I do have another very special guest with me. And as I do with every other podcast, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself. So if you could introduce yourself to the viewers, then that would be awesome.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for having me, man. I appreciate that. I'm happy to come on here and have a good discussion with you today. So, my name is Breton McNeil. I'm 24 years old. I'm originally from the Halifax area. I'm currently in my fourth year of kinesiology at Acadia University at the moment. And I am also a WNBF professional men's physique athlete. I've competed in a few shows, and most recently, my last competition season would have been 2018, and unfortunately my competition season was ended short this year with COVID going on, so I'm planning to do a prep next year. I think that's pretty much the gist of it.
That's probably, I think, that's the longest introduction I've ever got.
Okay, well, there you go. There you go. I was trying to think of things off the top of my head.
Yeah, some people are just like, oh, hi, my name is, and I'm from here. And then I'm just like, oh, shit. Now I got to know. Yeah, that's a really good introduction. I think people kind of have an idea. But yeah, so before we kind of get into the gist of some of the things you mentioned, I just kind of want to bring it back to what kind of got you interested in weightlifting. But more specifically, like, I guess you'd say bodybuilding or physique, like training for that kind of goal versus more of like sports related. So like what kind of drove you to kind of get interested into weightlifting?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So, actually, another thing I should have mentioned was I'm actually a type 1 diabetic. So, I was diagnosed at the age of 16. I always had a background. I played sports growing up. I played hockey, I played football, soccer, was very active growing up and stuff like that. But, like I mentioned, at the age 16, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And before that, I wasn't necessarily too much into the whole fitness side of things in terms of like training outside of my sport or like going to the gym or doing much additional physical activity. So really, when I was diagnosed, I kind of obviously was talking to doctors and everything like that. And one of the main suggestions from them to help kind of manage my blood sugars and kind of improve my quality of life as I live with this disease was to actually start just exercising regularly, doing some, cardio training, aerobic fitness, and some resistance training. So essentially, I started hitting the gym pretty seriously, I would say, at around 16 or 17 years old. And then after about a year or two, I was really noticing some pretty major improvements in terms of, putting on some muscle mass, getting a lot stronger, just making overall improvements to my physique. And through that process, just kind of through local gyms in Halifax and everything like that, I started getting introduced to some local fitness competitors who either did physique or bodybuilding, stuff like that. And a few of them mentioned to me, like, hey, man, like, you got a pretty impressive physique. Like, maybe you should try out, getting into a competition one of these times. So from there, well, one of the guys who said that to me was actually my coach at the time, who I worked with for the past few years now, which is, his name's Patrick. He goes by Patty Lifts on Instagram. So he's a great guy. He really kind of basically took me under his wing and kind of steered me into my first competition, told me the in and outs of competing, what it's all about. So what I really did was, hey, you know what? There's this local competition in Halifax. I'm a natural athlete myself. This was an untested show, and I was aware of that. But essentially, like I said, it was local. It was 20 minutes away from my house. I thought, you know what? Why not? I don't have to pay too much in terms of travel expenses or anything like that. So before I decide if I really like this sport, why not just try out a show close to me? I did the competition, and I came, I think I was like 11th or 12th out of 19 competitors. But I mean, like I said, my first show, untested show, me being natural, I was fine with that. I said, you know what, that was a great experience. I really realized, like, okay, you know what, I actually really enjoy the process of this sport. And then, so that was in 2016 when I did my first competition. And from there, the fire was lit, and I just really started taking things seriously since then. So over the past 4-ish, 5-ish years since then, things have kind of really ramped up, and I've gotten to where I am today kind of from there, I would say.
Awesome. That's funny that you mentioned that because I actually was I was working with Pat as well
Oh, okay, okay.
for probably about, I want to say like 7 or 8 months.
Oh, wow.
And in terms of like the show, I was in the same boat as well. Like so when I went into the competing, I was actually with a coach from like the local gym that I was at. So
Yep.
I don't know if you know Derek McDonald. He actually works up in O2 Wellness up
Okay.
in,
Okay.
yeah.
See,
Anyways, he moved up there. He's at Platinum Fitness. That's kind of where I go in Cape Breton. Anyway, so he was there, and then he mentioned that actually I just heard random talk about shows and stuff, and I was like, when I go full forth, when I like commit to something, I commit like pretty hardcore with it. So I was like, you know what, that's something I think I'd probably like give it my all. Like I probably think I could probably do pretty well if I gave it, you know what I mean, an honest effort. So for me, it was like I went to Derek, and he coached me for the first show, and I was in the same position as you as well. Like I didn't place nearly as well. It was more of a learning thing and just making sure like it's something that interests me. So I can totally relate to that, like just kind of going in, because like you don't really realize all the work that's actually required other than just like the training. Like you have to get the tan, you have to make sure like you show up on time, you have to make sure that like there's so much that goes into it, like that you have to make sure like you know where the venue is, that you have lodging, that you have your meals on the go. Like there's just so much that, like, for me looking back now, it's like going into my next show, which I plan to compete I'm thinking probably next year, COVID, obviously. I didn't really plan on competing this year. I wanted to take like 2 solid years, probably 2.5 solid years just from away from competing, was my goal. But anyways, I've reached out to Pat probably, I don't know, late 2019. And I worked with him during the off season just for probably like 7 months. And when things get picked back up, like when I get going again with it, I will reach out to him again for the show. But that's just a little bit of backstory. But that's funny that you mentioned Pat and the show as well. So
Yeah, no, man, that's awesome. Small world. I didn't even know you worked with him. Yeah, so I would have worked with Patrick. Geez, I worked with him the 3 competitions I did. So in 2016, I worked with him for my first show, and then he helped me with a bit of my off season. I kind of like did my own thing for most of my off season, and then once.
it's in the same boat with that as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and once again, when I won my pro card at the Muscle Mayhem in 2018, he prepped me for my entire show, and then for my first pro show as well after that. And then kind of since then as well, I'm just a little bit more comfortable with doing my own off season with my training and everything like that. I have a good idea of what works for me and kind of the scientific principles that I should be applying to my training and everything like that. So for me, really, I just enjoy having. Well, not only do I really trust Patrick and everything like that, obviously he knows his stuff. It's great to have a second eye, especially during contest prep when you're constantly questioning your conditioning, if you're going to show up on time, to have him kind of take that stress away from me, kind of put me in check and tell me that, everything's fine. We're right on game plan in terms of our conditioning and how far out we are, etc. So, yeah, it definitely takes a big stress off your shoulders working with a coach, I find. And someone like Patrick, like I mentioned, who you can really trust with the process, is a great guy to have in your corner.
Absolutely. So did you kind of know that you wanted to get your pro card? Was that something that like was on the back of your mind or was it something that you just kind of were like, you know what, if I get it, that's kind of cool. But like, was that a big goal of yours, was to get the pro card?
So, yes and no. So, what happened was, obviously, like we mentioned, working with Patrick after my first show, when I came, 11th or 12th, whatever, or 19, I was like, I'm just a very competitive guy. And I was like, you know what? I've only been training for like 2 years. I was like, I think I can do pretty well in this sport if I really, like you said, put your full effort and dedication into something. So, that at that time was right when actually Patrick won his pro card at the Natural Muscle Mayhem in California. So as soon as I was done,
Seen pictures of you guys there, like show pictures, I guess
yes,
you would say.
yes, yeah. So he won his pro card in physique right around the time I competed in my first show. So he kind of put that bug in my ear, and he was like, you know what, man? Like, he's like, I think you can do good. Like, let's kind of put you over to the WMBF organization, a natural tested organization, which obviously is where I wanted to end up anyways. Like I said, my first show was just kind of for experience.
Mhm.
So we kind of set the goal after he won that pro card. I was like, you know what? For 2 years from now, so it was 2016. I said in 2018, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do the Natural Muscle Mayhem in California. So, started saving some money and just started to really gear my training towards that kind of end goal. Obviously, like any competitor who doesn't want to go and compete for a pro card, like obviously that's everyone's kind
Yeah.
of goal. But in my head, I actually was not really expecting it. I was more or less like, I want to go, I want to enjoy the experience, meet competitors, and just experience the natural stream of bodybuilding. And then really my kind of goal, honest to God, when I first went in there, I said, if I don't come last, that would be pretty cool, because I had no idea like competition or who I was going to be up against. this is when my knowledge for the sport wasn't as developed as it is now. So for me to go in and kind of come out with that pro card at that show was like I was mind blown. So it was a pretty awesome experience. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you took like 2 years to build up to that.
Yeah.
So can you take me through like I guess like some of the highlights? I guess like in terms of like the prep that you did, was there something specifically that you focused on that you found was like a major contributor to the reason? Did you change your training, or did you like adjust your nutrition, or was there something that like really do you think that really helped you kind of like take it from where you were to like getting that pro card?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So essentially, it's just what a lot of people talk about. It was just like controlling those variables and actually taking things more seriously. So instead of like somewhat eyeballing my macros, I was tracking my macros pretty diligently, even in the off season for the 2 years leading up to that competition. So making sure I was in a caloric surplus, making sure that I was gaining weight at a reasonable rate was a big one, and another one was just really sticking to a workout plan for a long period of time. I did a podcast with my buddy Leroy a few weeks back, or maybe a month or two back now, and I mentioned to him, which is the truth. I think I followed the same workout routine and literally just progressed my lifts pretty much every week or two for about 12 months. So I picked like the bench press, it was a deadlift, like a single arm dumbbell row. There's a few main compound movements that I really focused on. I always kind of walked around, had my little physical logbook in my hand, and every single session, I made sure that I was improving one way or another, whether that was increasing the weight by 5 pounds, maybe slowing down the tempo a little bit,
Yeah.
adding an extra rep or two, maybe adding an extra set, any kind of form of progressive overload. So it was essentially controlling my nutrition, making sure I was in a surplus, sleeping really well at night, and just making sure I was training progressively and continuously getting stronger, which made me add 10 pounds to my stage weight. So in 2016, I walked on stage at 148, and then I walked on stage at 158 in 2018. So it seemed to have done the trick.
So peak bulk, what did you get to for weight wise?
Peak bulk.
Like during that prep, I guess you would say.
Yeah, so during that time between 2016 before my 2018 prep, so yeah, I walked off stage at 148 in 2016, and then I think I pushed my weight up to about 185 is what I did, roughly about 180 185 at that time. Yeah, and then like I said, I cut back down, and my new stage weight was 158, so it was a decent amount of gains made in that time for sure.
Yeah, I see right now I'm around 180, well, at 187, 188 I've been like maintaining.
Yep.
I started to do, but I brought it down from 205 I think, but during when I did my show I was 168.
Okay.
Um
Right on. Yep.
167 I think. So like I'm looking to kind of like grow, but I decided to like with COVID and everything, I decided to do a cut because like I was
Yep.
basically just bulking and the home workouts just wasn't cutting it, and I just kind of it just was going to get out of control if I didn't do something. So I'm committing to a cut to the end of the year, and then after that, I'm going to transition.
Yep.
But yeah, that's awesome. So for your next thing I want to ask you about was like for your calories, like did you have, or how long was your prep? I understand it was obviously 2 years, but like from your show prep, like from like the moment that you were gonna like start dieting for the show, like how long was the dieting process?
Right. So yeah, for 2018. So I started dieting for the Muscle Mayhem at 28 weeks out.
28 weeks. So it was a
Yeah.
28-week prep.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because
And
like
so
to have that much time, right? Because like
yes.
when you know exactly like and you're in a good position, like you kind of knew obviously 2 years before you wanted to do something like that, so it gave you plenty of time to understand and put yourself in a good position. Because unlike me, it was like I had like I lost like I went from 255, well, 240 pounds. Oh no, I don't think I was 240. I think it was like 225 pounds to 168 pounds in 13 weeks.
Oh God. Jesus.
Yeah. So, because like I just kept like we didn't know where my body was going to be or whatever. So like each week it was like we're cutting this, we're adding more cardio. So each week I had no idea where I was going to end up. I thought it'd be like the 190s, 180s, and then
Right.
like I got down there and I wasn't even near lean, right?
Yeah.
And like I didn't have as much muscle as I thought I did as well. So for me it was like, and I was working with Derek, and he just basically was like, every week it was just adding cardio and adding taking out carbs, and then it was just it was a crazy process. But
Yeah,
that's good that you had that much time, so you kind of like had an opportunity to kind of like preserve a little bit of muscle, kind of like heading into the show,
yeah.
I guess you.
And also we plan for that much time because well, kind of just like you mentioned there, the number one thing with most competitors is they don't realize how much body fat they have and how
Yeah,
long it actually takes to get in true stage conditioning. So I knew that when I started my prep, I was like, okay, my body fat percentage right now, 185, was pretty high. Like I was looking fluffy. I had the big chubby cheeks. I was carrying around some extra weight, so I
yeah.
knew I was going to have to lose, a good 20, 30 plus pounds or so. So I just made sure that I had enough time to get in shape to do that, essentially.
Yeah, and it's funny how like some parts will like work themselves out way longer before other parts. Like there's certain parts that were stubborn on me that was like I had a hard time like losing. Like my legs, for example, like they were the last to kind of get, you know what I mean, like in
Yep.
condition, I guess you would say. Like my core, obviously too. Like I store a lot of fat in like my midsection and my legs. So like I noticed like right off the bat from like dieting, like I lost all, like I thought I had way, I guess I thought I had way bigger arms, but like as soon as I started dieting, like I was like, shit, where do my arms go?
Yeah,
So
absolutely,
like
man.
things just like work themselves out, and next thing you know, it's like holy shit, like you know what I mean? Like you have to work so hard to like it's kind of good to get to a certain point in your diet, and you start noticing like you're getting leaner, you're getting fuller and stuff like that. But like to get those like 3 or 4 extra pounds like at the end, like those are the killer because
Absolutely.
you're already in like death mode basically, right?
100%. Absolutely. No, I agree with you totally. And that's just what it is, right? Everyone genetically kind of just has those areas where they hold on to stubborn body fat, and it's just you need that last few extra pounds just to really drop it and come in with get that muscle in the condition that you want, essentially. But yeah, no, definitely, man, I can totally relate to you there.
So for your cardio, like how much cardio were you doing? Like max cardio for the show?
So I didn't do what I did for my 2018 prep, which I personally really enjoyed because I think it was a lot more consistent on terms of like an energy balance basis. Was I actually tracked my steps. So what I did
Mhm.
was I didn't say, okay, I'm doing 4 30-minute or cardio sessions a week at a medium intensity or
Yeah,
something along those lines. I started off with, okay, 28 weeks out or whatever, I'm averaging about 6,000 steps a day. So I would keep my calories at a certain set point, keep my steps at a certain set point, and then as the weeks went on, I'd either make an adjustment to one or the other. Either maybe drop calories a bit, leave that. Oh, maybe we're going to increase my daily steps by 1,000 or 2,000 steps. And I find that works a lot better because as you get leaner, your energy so low that the things that you do on a daily basis you stop doing. So if you have all this extra body fat, and maybe at the start of your prep you're going out and walking your dog all the time, or you're going swimming with your friends, or whatever it is, you're walking on the golf course, the leaner you get, the less energy you have to actually do those activities. So I find it kind of throws off that energy balance, and maybe you are doing those extra cardio sessions, but because you're so low on energy, you're not doing the things you would in your normal daily life, so that kind of
yeah,
calorie balance doesn't really even out. So I just found for me that tracking your steps was the most accurate way to make sure that I'm expending the same level of energy every single day throughout the entire prep, basically.
yeah. I think that's even more consistent way. I think that's a really good way to do it. See, I did it based on like I forgot what it was for my prep, but it was minutes. So like, but I mean, it changed so much that like there wasn't like a set. I think I was up to like 2 hours of cardio a day.
Oh,
So and I was working full time as well. So for me, it was just
oh,
like
Jesus.
I would wake up in the morning. I would do an hour cardio at like 5 or 6 a.m. I luckily I lived at my parents' place at the time, so like I had a treadmill.
Okay.
So like they had a treadmill in the basement, so it was like that was clutch because I don't think I mean I probably would have got my ass to the gym, but like it was in the middle of like the winter. Like I think it was like February. Like I did my show in April, so like February, March, it was like the weather still wasn't the best. So it was nice being able to have that treadmill, but I was up to like 2 hours a day at one point. I forget how long it was exactly, but like I would do an hour cardio in the morning, try to bang that out. I would work all day and like go to work till like 5 or something like that. Bring everything with me, go to the gym, get my workout in, and then get the hour of post workout cardio. So like my
Well,
day literally just consisted of like cardio, work, gym, cardio, sleep.
Wow, man, 2 hours of cardio a day. Yeah, see, no,
Yeah,
no. I think the most I
yeah,
would do, like, because some days obviously my steps would be higher than others. So what I would do is incorporate like kind of like a daily walk to hit that step goal. And I think, yeah, for the most part, I would say like my farthest I would do was like a 45 minute like walk. So what really was never like too intense. I found that was helped
yeah.
with recovery as well. So just
I don't
training at a
even know
slow.
what the numbers would be. Like, I don't even know what, but I feel like that would be a really good way to determine it because like steps is a way more accurate way. Because like you mentioned, I think if you put it into perspective, like when you're getting lean and you're getting like down to the contest, like you don't even want to, you know what I mean, get up and do the dishes. You know what I mean? It's like anything that requires. So it's like I think the steps would be really good because like there's so many inconsistencies during the day where it's like you might go shopping with your girlfriend or you might like go out and have to pick up a parcel or like something like that where it's like you are getting some form and like every little bit counts, especially when you're such like low energy. So I think it's like it acts as like a better. I feel like it would act as a better comparison because if you're like, well, I'm doing 30 minutes of cardio a day, but like I didn't take into consideration, you know what I mean, that I went golfing with my friend on blah blah blah, or I went out and like did something like I went to the mall and we shop for Christmas for 3 hours, or you know what I
Yeah,
mean, or whatever it is.
that's
So I think
exactly.
that would be, yeah, I think that would be a really, really good way. So I just want to touch on two more things about the show there.
Yeah.
So what do you feel is like, I guess not necessarily, it could be within the 2 years, but like from when you knew that you were going to do the natural show, what did you find was like your biggest struggle? Like in terms of like actually like from getting to where you started, actually getting that pro card, what do you think it was like the biggest thing that like you struggled with the most?
In terms of like, would you say like a physique goal of mine or?
Just like balancing the training, like maybe did you always find like yourself like training at different times, like working around other people's, like were you training with somebody else with a different schedule, or did you find it hard for like consistently meal prepping your meals, or just like anything to do with like the training, or maybe it could be the posing, like did you, because I know for me personally, like that's something I'm trying to, it's hard when you don't have check-ins. Like I find that that's the biggest thing because I went from like working with two different coaches where there'd be check-ins, and I think that's the biggest thing that I'm missing with an off season
Right.
is not having those check-ins. Because like I mean I'll do them on Sunday myself and I'll just basically take pictures of myself and like, but I mean, like, and maybe post them on Instagram or whatever it is. But like, for me to have like that consistency with the check-ins and then try to improve on posing, because I knew that that was the one thing that I was completely like I just blew was the posing. So that was one thing that I was like, you know what, this like during the off season, I'm going to practice like posing, right? So,
Yep.
but I mean that every now and then that will come and go, and so like lately I've been pretty consistent with it. Probably like with the last month, I've been pretty good with it. But like something like that, was there something that you were like you had a hard time with, or you thought that you were going to be able to control, but maybe you didn't control so well?
Right. I would say so. Definitely the posing as well. Like you mentioned, my first show posing was not very great, and that was something that just felt so uncomfortable and unnatural for me. So I definitely had to learn how to pose and actually present my physique. Absolutely. I was lucky in terms of I've actually always been one. Geez, I rarely kind of have a training partner up until this year, which is awesome. I have a roommate who's really into the gym with me, so me and him go to the gym and we train a lot together now.
Yeah,
But just the way my schedule worked for, geez, I've trained solo for the past 4 or 5-ish years just because different schedules. I was never a guy really, just because my days could vary. Like a lot of the time, I've been a student for the past like 4 or 5-ish years. So for me, I
yeah,
could go. Maybe sometimes I'll go in the morning before classes if I don't have a class that starts till 10 or 11, or maybe I'll go for my 2 hour gap in between class one day. So for me, it was just really working on my own schedule. It was just a lot more convenient for me. So that was never too
yeah.
much of an issue.
Partner when like you're going at, you know what I mean, different times every day, right?
Exactly, exactly. But to be honest, I don't think there was like one specific thing that I could think of on the top of my head that would have been a massive like struggle or anything for mine. It was just making sure that consistent, making sure I'm getting my training. And like I said, there would definitely be some days where I'm like, oh, I don't want to track my macros today, or I don't want to eat this much food. And there's definitely days where I didn't, and you know what I mean. I wasn't absolutely perfect
Yeah,
every single day, but it was just the idea of making sure that I'm consistent over the long period of time. If I have an off day, every 2 weeks or whatever the case may be, that's not going to add up in the grand scheme of things if I'm on track 13 days of the 14. You know what I mean? So it was
Yeah.
essentially just putting my mindset in the right place of realizing that I'm not going to be perfect. I'm also a young guy. You know what I mean? This would have been back when I was 21, 22 years old. I enjoy to also go out to restaurants and have drinks with my friends and be social and go to these events as well. So making sure that I could fit that into my lifestyle and not just being so black and white, being like I'm all diehard bodybuilding. I can't eat out or have a beer with my friends. Just making
Yeah.
sure I'm having that good balance of everything, and I'm actually just enjoying the process, and it doesn't feel like I'm just sacrificing my life to reach this pro card goal, essentially.
Yeah, that's a good. I think that's where a lot of people struggle, right? Like they either have to be on. Like I'm kind of that way. Like I'll admit it. Like for me, it's like I can't have like one thing going. It's got to be everything. Like once like I have a bad training session, like it impacts like my nutrition, or
Yeah,
like if I like have a shit meal or something, like it will impact. So like for me, like it's either like all or nothing or just
yeah,
nothing. You know what I mean? And for me, it's something I have to work on myself.
yeah.
But I think that that's just the way like I've always been was like you know what I mean? If something like doesn't work out according to plan, it's just for me, it's like a it affects me so much, right? So
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I was the same way for a long time, and I think just through time and experience and stuff like that, I was just able to kind of work on that mentality and make little adjustments here and there because I would be the same way. There was times in the past where it'd be so black and white. I'd have a terrible diet for 3 days in a row because I had one bad meal, and I feel like, oh, what's the point, kind of thing. And you would have those
yeah,
times, and then you get back into it, and you don't eat anything bad at all, and then you have that one meal again, and it's back to the cycle. So it was just cutting that out and just realizing that moderation is okay and it doesn't have to be so black and white, like I said.
yeah, absolutely. So now talking about like after the show, I guess like looking back now, I would assume you probably have like more knowledge now than you did when you got your pro card or whatever. But like looking back now, what would you say is like what are you trying to do differently now to your approach to competing versus what you did? Is there anything that like you're trying to improve or any type of like maybe like some scientific stuff that you're trying to apply to your training or maybe like a new way of eating or something like is there something now that you're trying to adopt more into your training going into like your next competitive obviously it would have been this year but with COVID is there something that you've adopted new or that
Um,
you've learned?
a couple things, I guess, what I would say for me is as I'm dieting and getting leaner, making sure to take more deloads. So towards my competition, the leaner I'm getting, I'm going to deload more frequently because that was one thing I was probably getting to an overtrained state more often than I should.
Yeah,
Making sure to, well, actually, no, last time I was pretty good with like refeeds, but just being pretty, I want to incorporate more refeeds and like diet breaks if the time allows it, and just making sure that I'm not like crash dieting or anything too hard and just really taking things gradually and applying all the tools in my tool belt that I can to essentially make things go flawlessly the best I can, which just from a couple changes from last time, like I said, I think I should have deloaded a little bit more. There were some sessions where I probably should have toned back my training volume a little bit. Just a couple things like that. I wouldn't say necessarily like a major drastic change. Like not completely switching up my training or a lot of people tend to go on this idea of I'm going to take my rep ranges and put them way higher because it's going to like tone the muscle and all these certain things and
or
definitely
or
not.
or I have to change my training split because I'm dieting. You
Yeah,
know what
yeah,
I mean? I feel
stuff
like
like
a lot
that.
of people are like that. They're like, because I was kind of like under that. No, I wouldn't say I was under that, but like you see people that are always like, oh, now that I'm dieting, I can't do deadlifts, or now that you know what I mean. Now that I'm dieting, it's just like you still can. You just gotta like, it's just a lot. It's gonna be a lot harder, right?
Yeah,
But yeah,
I, I forget who said the quote, but it was one of my favorites. It said, "What built the muscle will keep the muscle." So whatever you're doing to build your muscle and improve your physique, well, keep doing that while you're dieting. There's no need to drastically change everything up. So yeah, that's what I
yeah.
say.
The only thing that I would say is like maybe don't try to hit PRs.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Especially if it's like so close to a show because well I mean you can do it if you're like you know what I mean like 24 weeks and you're still like in a decently good state but like once you get down to like you know what I mean like 3-4 weeks out like
Yes.
you're definitely not building any muscle
No,
like you
no,
know what I
absolutely.
mean? More so in like the state of just like like maintaining the muscle and just getting the workouts in, like giving it stimulus to basically like stay on your body and help burn some extra calories, right? So I think a lot of people, that's another thing I think is a popular belief, is like people think they have to like rewire their whole training system, or they have to increase the intensity, and they start like supersetting everything. You know what I
I
mean?
agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So in terms of like your, I want to get into the training in a little bit, but in terms of your, 1 second here, I'm just gonna make sure. Yeah. So with your training, I just kind of wanted to jump into that right quick.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that like, so with your training, like, are you I kind of have an understanding that you're more of a structured kind of like approach to your training.
Right. Yep.
So can you explain like why you like the biggest thing that I have is like defining like structured training with like intuitive training. And I find that like some days like I'll go in with a workout program and like I'll follow it, but then like if something like is taken, so for example, like if I'm supposed to do cable flies or
Yep.
something and like everybody's on the cables, like I'll just do like a pec deck fly.
Absolutely.
And, like I understand like progressive overload, like you mentioned, you brought the workout book to the gym and like you were tracking your weights, and like picking your exercises. Like, can you just kind of briefly explain like why it's important to you to actually like follow a training program versus just kind of like not necessarily willy-nillying it, but just going in and training how you feel.
Yeah.
And we're doing this based on like someone who's not a beginner, like somebody, because I feel like a beginner would not necessarily like know their body,
Right.
but somebody more of like an intermediate to advanced, like what would be the difference? Why do you think it's important to kind of do that versus just training like intuitively?
Yeah, yeah, so definitely. So the number one thing which I like it didn't like I didn't figure this concept out till well I did figure it out years ago, but essentially going in and constantly doing a new exercise and not tracking your progress from week to week, you don't know if you're improving. So if I do just say for example I'm doing a push day every Monday, and then every Monday, one Monday I start with a bench press, and then I start with a dumbbell shoulder press, or maybe then I start with a incline barbell press. There's no way to see if I'm actually progressing on those movements if I'm constantly changing them up. So just
Yeah.
picking an exercise for me, number one, that targeting a muscle group that I feel like I'm trying to bring up, and I can also stimulate that muscle group really well. So, for example, a lot of people have difficulty creating like a mind muscle connection with their back. So, like not a bent over barbell row, maybe not be the best movement for everyone. So, for me, it's really important to have variety. Well, like especially when I was a beginner, I had a lot of variety in my training in terms of using different machines, using a bunch of different dumbbell exercises, a bunch of different barbell movements, and I've been able to kind of, through a process of elimination, figure out which are going to stimulate the muscles best for me, allow me to get the best mind muscle connection. Also, obviously, workouts that I just enjoy. There's some movements that I don't really like doing. So, you know what? I'm probably not going to adhere to them in the long term, and I'm probably not going to
Yeah.
want to give my full intensity on those movements. So, that's probably not a good exercise for me. So, like I said, in terms of just picking exercises that I can make sure and I can track that I'm progressively overloading on them, and just making sure that they're movements that are good for like the biomechanics and how I'm built, and that I can like perform the movements properly with a proper range of motion, and stimulate that target muscle and kind of get a good mind muscle connection. It's kind of like the thought process going through my head when I choose an exercise.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, or like you mentioned as well, there'll definitely be days where, like I said, I'm in school and stuff, and I don't have 3 hours in my day to just sit and wait around for a machine if it's taken. So I just try and substitute that exercise for something that's going to be very similar, just like you mentioned. If I have a cable fly programmed, well, guess what? If it's taken, a pec deck's the next best thing. So
Yeah.
definitely I do that. And yeah, I think if that answers your question, or if you have any more specifics around that or anything you want to
Yeah,
know.
so just kind of want to dive into more specifically. So, like, if I want to take like a very, I guess you'd say like simple muscle group, like the like a back would be kind of like complex, but like the chest, for example, like if you were going to go and you were going to start like a new training or a mesocycle or like a microcycle or whatever, however you want to break your training down. But like
Yep.
if you were to take like a specific thing, you're saying, listen, I'm going to focus on I'm gonna do a new micro or mesocycle. So if you're doing like a month worth of training, like
Yep.
how many, I guess like how many exercises would you, obviously depending on your body, but like if you're gonna regulate your volume. So let's say you were to start off with like 12 weekly sets or whatever, 14 weekly sets. how many exercises do you do for chest? Like if you were going in on day one, like how many exercises would you say you would program for chest?
Right. So what I do for sure is I just like this has been a more recent thing over the past few years of figuring out, just like you said, okay, how many sets per week do I need to kind of reach an effective volume for each muscle group? Like, so for me specifically, like my back, I can handle a ton of work. So my back, I may be able to hammer like 20 to 25 sets a week, where versus like maybe my quads or my chest may be more along the lines of like 10 to 12 to 14 sets. So for one,
Yeah.
for me, it was figuring out which muscle groups could handle which amounts or how much volume I could handle essentially. But yeah, so for example, I'll just give you, I like to focus on throughout a mesocycle, basically one compound movement that I incorporate twice a week for a certain body part. So for example, right now I'm running a upper, lower, rest, and then a push-pull leg split.
Yeah,
So
I noticed that. I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah.
yeah, so for my upper day, I incorporate a T-bar row and I incorporate a flat dumbbell press. So I like to start the week with a little bit heavier, more strength focused, kind of maybe like 4 sets of like I don't know 5 to 8 reps, even like 6 to 8 reps. So not necessarily that low, but just a little bit higher intensity. And then I will
Yeah.
also start my push session with a flat dumbbell press, and then my pull session with a T-bar row again. So I'm getting the movement frequency in twice per week. I find it just allows me to be really efficient in executing that like movement pattern. So I just get better with the more practice I have with it. So I usually do that for each mesocycle. So if I do a 4 to 6 week block, it's like, okay, my T-bar row is my main back compound movement. I'm hitting that twice a week. My dumbbell press is my main chest movement. I'm hitting that twice a week. And then I'll usually just have like 1 to 2 accessory movements in there. So if it's flat dumbbell chest press for my chest, obviously, I
Yeah.
may also add in like on the upper day, maybe like 2 or 3 sets of like a cable fly. And then on my upper day, I may have the same cable fly, or I may also add in just say like a machine chest press or like an incline chest press. So what I like to do, like I said, is just pick a main compound for each muscle group and really focus on that throughout the week over an entire mesocycle, and then just have a few accessories throughout that. So over a given week, I may be doing say 14 sets for chest, but that may be over only like 2 to 3 different exercises, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so to kind of get it right. So if you were taking the example of chest and you were hitting it twice a week, let's say you were hitting on it like Monday and Wednesday, you would
Yep.
have the staple exercise being like a dumbbell press, and
Yep.
that would be on both days. And then
Yes.
you would have like maybe an isolation exercise, but it could change. So like Monday,
Yes.
you might do a different isolation exercise than you would on Wednesday. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes, you got it, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then in terms of like, so just to kind of get a little bit further into this. So in terms of like your adding in sets over the week,
Yep.
do you prefer, so if you were like, let's say you mentioned like a muscle group could handle like one of your muscles, like your back could handle a lot more volume than some of your other muscle groups. So obviously you have a little bit more flexibility there with actually adding in volume. So if you
Yes.
take your back, for example, would you be more likely as you kind of progressed in the mesocycle and like the
Yep.
sets were to go up, would you prefer to add sets to the same exercise, or would you prefer, like, let's say you had 3 sets that you were increasing it by, would
Yep.
you like to tag that on to one of the exercises you already have, or would you add in another exercise with 3 sets of that?
So me personally, I enjoy just adding in a set to the exercise that I'm doing. So at the start
You,
of the
you really
mesocycle,
like, yeah,
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 so like it could be 3 sets of the T-bar row for the first couple weeks, and then maybe my final 2 weeks, it's 4 sets of the T-bar row, kind of thing like that. Instead of adding in a whole kind of brand new exercise to the mix, I just like to add sets to my already established exercises.
yeah. And then in terms of like, just one last thing on the
Yep.
training thing, for the intensity aspect of it, like,
Right.
this is probably the number one most, I don't know, like, there's so many different opinions on it. It's like, well, it's like for me, it's always I just like training hard, and I think everybody can relate to that. Like I think everybody just likes going to the gym and training hard. Not saying that like if you're periodizing your training, you're not training hard, because you definitely are, but you're
Yep.
doing it smarter versus harder.
Right.
And so like with training intensity, like how do you approach training intensity? So let's say like at the start of a cycle versus at the end of a cycle, or do you just like you feeling good that day and you go and you're hitting T-bar rows and your last day, screw it, I'm just going to drop a plate off and do a drop set. Like, is it something that you do on the spot, or is it something that you like meticulously place into your training and you gradually?
So I try to plan it out. Sometimes it doesn't always go that way because I'm not always the best at following my own RPE guidelines or like my intensity guidelines. So the way I used to do it was, yeah, basically like, okay, week one or maybe week one and week two we're working at like an RPE 7 and 8, and then gradually that up to like a 9, and then last week maybe a 10, like all out till failure. So I try to manage my intensity like that just so I don't accumulate too much fatigue over the mesocycle. Um,
Yeah.
but in saying that, I've actually recently been adding, instead of like just say last year, if I had 3 sets of 8 programmed for a bench press, I would try and do my 3 sets. Just say it was 225. I would try and do 225 for 3 sets of 8. But my training style a lot recently has been more focused on like a top set. So I'll do
Yeah.
a couple warm up sets, and then my first working set is pretty much balls to the wall, all out I can do. And I just really focus on increasing that each week. So even my first week of the mesocycle, could be coming pretty close to failure on that top set. And then my back off sets, I do drop the weight a little bit to try and stay within the rep ranges that I have programmed for myself. But the goal is for me week to week to be able to increase either the weight or the reps on that top set. And then same with my back off sets, kind of just gradually increase the amount of reps I'm using with that weight or increase the weight on my back off sets, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, ideally, I'm trying to not take the training straight till failure or a bunch of exercises till failure until towards the end of the mesocycle. And I'm definitely more lenient, though, with my accessory movements and some of my smaller muscle groups. Like, I'll take my side delt training to failure quite often, or like my biceps and stuff like that. But just for some of
Yeah.
my bigger compound movements, like especially deadlifts and stuff like that, I really try and follow more of an RPE guideline, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of like that's a really good approach. I think that's the most misunderstood thing is that people think that like it's very, for my in my opinion on it, it's very exercise dependent. So
Yep.
like obviously you're not going to take a deadlift to failure like as you would with like an isolation exercise. So if you were doing like a pec deck fly or like some type of like I don't know like machine preacher curl or something where you've got a little bit more control and you're able to get to failure a little bit easier and it's a lot less taxing on like your nervous system and everything else. So I think
Absolutely.
that when people talk about like training to failure, I think that like they associate it with like every exercise. It's like, do you take that to failure? Do you take, but like based on your training, it's like it might not be beneficial to take a bench press to failure, but it could be beneficial to take like a pec deck fly or like a rear delt or something that can handle a little bit more. I think that makes complete sense. And I'm kind of like bad for that as well because like I'll go in there and I'll just like I want to like leave the gym basically feeling like destroyed.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah.
like a bad like I that's why I always had a hard time being like okay well I did my 3 sets or I did my 6 sets and like RPE like I'll use an RPE and but for me it was just something that like and I mean that's something I'm working on myself as well is just trying to make sure I'm managing my volume because I'm definitely probably in the overtrained area.
Absolutely.
But then like going back to adherence as well it's like that's just fun for me. Like I went through a thing where it was like motivation was a little bit lower, and
Yeah.
honestly, like I found the biggest thing that got me to the gym some days was just going there and having fun.
Yep.
And if that's doing like a triple drop set on a T-bar row, for like that might sound like screwed up, but like for me that's fun. Like doing a triple drop set. Like I don't know, it's challenging, it's different, it's
Yep.
sporadic. So for me, it's just like versus like going in there and doing like 3 sets of bench press and like hitting all 8 reps and staying at an RPE 8.5 the whole time. You know what I mean? Like that was like
Absolutely.
mission accomplished because now you're going to be able to progress next week. And it's like the goal was like that was the goal. But for me, it's just like some days it's like, well, it's just a motivation thing for me. So like being so sporadic and having a little bit of variety into your program. So I guess to follow up and kind of transition into that, how or do you do like how do you incorporate variety into your program like even though you're so structured with like your or you're trying to be structured with your training how do
Yep.
you kind of like if you kind of need variety how do you allow yourself to kind of do that?
Yeah, well, absolutely, man. So, I agree with you. First off, the only exercise program that's going to work is one that you can adhere to. It can be the best in the book, and you can follow all the RPA guidelines all you want. If you don't enjoy it, you're not going to go. Then you're not going to make any progress. So I totally agree with what you're saying. But yeah, so for me, for variety, what I would say is, for me, I really enjoy the compound lifts. Like, I know that I love to deadlift. I love to incline dumbbell press. I love to, do a bent over row, whatever those movements are. I've always loved them. I love them for years. So I always incorporate those no matter what, just because I simply enjoy them. And like I said, they kind of they check the boxes for everything that I want in terms of, hitting the target muscles. I feel the exercise working. I get a good range of motion, etc. But for variety, more or less, it's probably just more my accessory movements. If I, want to try out maybe a single arm cable curl or something like that, that's just a little bit different. Like, I'll try that out and add it in for a mesocycle, see if I enjoy it, and if I do, maybe I'll keep it in for an extra one or something like that. Or if not, I'll substitute it for something different. But I guess a good example of that would be, I just recently got a new gym membership because I moved. I'm living in Wolfville now. I usually train at a Good Life, but there is just a few new machines here at this gym that I would never really normally have access to. So I started to incorporate into this new mesocycle. So I never had a hack squat before, and now I have access to a hack squat, and I love it. So you know what? That's actually, for me right now, that's substitute out for a barbell back squat. So I really enjoy it. It allows me, it's just a more stable exercise for me, less pressure off my lumbars. Like, everything's just kind of checking those boxes for me for why I should transfer over to that movement. So until I try it out, which is just usually throwing it into a mesocycle, seeing if I like it, and that's kind of how I go about things, figuring out, if this is an exercise kind of worthwhile for me to stick with, essentially.
Yeah, I think that it's like you can always put it in your back pocket too, right? Like,
Yeah.
like hack squats they're pretty awesome. Like, you try it out and you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna stick to my program, but like maybe I'll throw it in next mesocycle because I've determined that like I like it. So it's always there for you, like at your disposal. You know what I mean? Like, you're not gonna forget about it. So like, if you need to incorporate it in, I think that's like a really good way. And I'm the same way too. I normally would train at like, I'm back and forth between like Sydney and Truro. So for me, it's like Platinum has different machines than Good Life does. But
Right.
like, there's one machine like I really love like the high row, like the seated row where your chest and you've got the one that's going overhead like that. I find that one like really, really, I much prefer that versus like a lat pull down.
Right.
And if I'm gonna do a lat pull down, I normally just do the single. I just, instead of putting the wide grip on there, I just take a single thing. I basically just try to do that. But like, that feeling from like coming out and back, it's almost like a polo row. I don't know. It's a really awesome machine. But that one there is absolutely awesome. But every time I come back to Cape Breton, like, they don't have it, so I might be going like 2 weeks at a time without it. But I understand completely what you mean. Like, you go to a new gym or you go somewhere new and you're like, holy shit, like, they have some pretty awesome machines. You know what I mean? Like, and then you have to try the move. It's just something that
No, and I'll also mention something that I haven't really heard many people do this before. It's kind of something I unique will just do from time to time. So just to kind of back up my point of trying out some new exercises and having fun. If I finish a mesocycle and I'm kind of unsure of the way I want to structure my next one, I actually will give myself a week, and I kind of just call it like, I don't have a name for it. It's called like a fun week, essentially. So, okay, I finished a 6-week mesocycle. I just deloaded, and I'm kind of unsure of where I want to place different exercises, or maybe I want to try out some new movements. I'll actually just follow the same structure of my last mesocycle for a week, but not doing the same exercises. And I won't go to failure or anything, but I'll literally just have a full week of the same training split, but all different movements, in terms of like maybe changing my incline dumbbell press to an incline Smith machine press, and I'll just change everything up for the entire week, not going till failure, so it's not like a first week or a very taxing week. And I'll literally just play around with the new movements for a week, and then that gives me a better idea of like, oh yeah, you know what, I want to actually add that into my next mesocycle. And it's a good way for me just to, like you said, have variety in my training, and it kind of keeps me fresh. And if I feel like, I haven't done this or neglected an exercise for a while, it kind of brings it back up in my memory, and I can add that into the next mesocycle as well.
Yeah, that reminds me of you've probably heard of him, the hypertrophy coach.
Yeah.
And like Terrence Ruffin or whatever, he's being coached by him or whatever. They legit do like the same program for like, I don't know how long he's been doing that same program, but he's been doing it for a while now. And he's basically just progressively overloading each and every, like, he's trying to like obviously just apply progressive overload. But I don't know how often they change their exercise, but I know I watched a couple of his videos on YouTube there. And he was just saying that like they've been doing the same workout, like they know it, like, you know what I mean? And they just try to get better at it. So that's kind of what it reminded me of when you were like, you pick a couple movements and you basically just try to master them. And then as you go through, just find new variations, and then you throw that in as you go, kind of thing, right?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
So I kind of want to touch on to the coaching and the business side of things, and like maybe your education. So kind of how did you get started into, I understand that you took your certification through CanFit. Was that the only one? Was that the only one that you did at the time, or before you got into kinesiology?
Yeah, right. So I did. So that's like the basically kind of how I got into things, I guess. So I first actually came out of high school and I took a 2-year business diploma at NSCC. And as I was graduating from there, I was realizing, like, you know what, this isn't quite my field of interest. Like, I was really getting into the bodybuilding, everything like that. So what I decided to do, I was like, you know what, I'm going to branch out and I'm just going to try this CanFit Pro thing. It was like a weekend course. It was a couple weekends in a row. Got my certification. It was great. And from there, I was like, you know what, this is something like I really want to pursue, but I want to take it to a higher level. So that's when I applied, and I went to actually Holland College. They have a 2-year program where you get a kinesiology diploma. And through there, you're also able to write like a CPT to get a certified personal training certification. You can go through that process from there, and then that's actually when I decided, you know what, I would like to transfer kind of my 2 years there into Acadia University and finish my degree. So everything from my first 2 years transferred over here to Acadia, and I'll be able to finish up my degree here next year. So through that process, you have, like I said, certain courses that you pick and certain electives like exercise programming, and you can kind of tailor the degree towards what you're interested to. And through some of those programs, you're able to be certified to write certifications like resistance training leader certifications, certified personal training certifications, different things like that. So that's it's been like a ladder of slowly kind of increasing my knowledge, my certifications, and education.
So do you have anything that, like, after you're done school, do you have any other courses that are on the bucket list to kind of complete, or do you have anything else lined up where you think would be kind of cool to do?
Well, funny enough, man, this is just kind of what I'm deciding, because I am graduating this year, and then it's like, okay, what do I do next year? Where do I go from here? So I'm looking at right now. I don't know for sure, so it's nothing set in stone or anything but I'm looking at working towards my CEP, which is like a clinical exercise physiologist. So so that's what I'm working towards right now, and that's kind of the goal as of hopefully get that next year, because once I graduate this year, I should have most of the required courses to write that, but I may need a few more. So I'm kind of actually setting up a meeting with the person who's in charge of that here soon. I'm going to discuss with him what requirements I'm additionally going to need after this year, and kind of look at taking some of those next year, and then hopefully writing that certification, which is like one of the kind of the highest gold standards you can achieve in terms of like exercise and physiology and personal training in Canada right now. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I'm doing the sports nutrition course right now through ISSA. And then that they had like a bodybuilding specialization course as well. I thought that would be kind of cool. So I'll probably end up doing that. I'm learning a lot right now with that sports nutrition course. And that was something I wanted to like improve on myself, was just like learning general knowledge, but also applying it to coaching businesses, like the coaching business that I have, but also like applying it to my own training. I thought like it was a win-win. And I did take the CanFit one as well. So for me, it was kind of like trying to level up. And then I seen that you did the kinesiology. It was something I always thought about, but I don't know if I'd be willing to go back to school for like 4 or 5 years. Even though like I'm 30 right now, but like for me, it's just like these online courses are so like conveniently good. You know what I mean? There's so much information for me, so it's just like an experience, I think, is like huge too. Like, so like with your degrees, like, do you plan on? I understand that you do coaching and stuff like that. Is that something you plan on investing all your attention into, or do you think that if there was, are you kind of like looking for an opportunity to kind of like work for like maybe a university or something where you'd be able to like, or maybe work with like a sports team, or like, is there something that like would interest you with that, or do you feel like you would like to do the coaching like full time online or something? You know what I mean? Like down that road.
So honestly, I'm keeping my options open, because I really do enjoy the online coaching. I really love what I do, and I'm thankful to be in the position to be able to have clients that want to work with me and be able to, make income and revenue from that, which is phenomenal. But I'm also a guy who I enjoy talking and communicating with people on a daily basis and just doing stuff that is more than just in my house. So, for example, well, yes, last summer it was kind of my first time that it was the summer break, and it was time off from university. And instead of going out and getting a job, I actually was like fully self-employed from home from my clients, which felt awesome. It was great. But then I also realized, like, I don't know if I would want to just sit home on my laptop all day and do that as my full-time job, just because I like getting out and talking to people and just doing different things. So that was something that kind of weighed on me a little bit in terms of like, maybe I don't know if this is essentially maybe my end goal to do everything online. I think actually in an ideal world, I open up my own tiny little personal training studio and I train clients in person for half the day by myself in that studio, and then I do another half online, so I can get a mix of that like in-person interaction. But also this year, just like you mentioned, as in like working with sports teams or something like that, I'm lucky enough that I'm working with the hockey team at Acadia and the basketball team right now. So I'm getting a lot of experience working in like kind of a team environment as like a strength and conditioning coach, and that's something I didn't. No, I thought I would enjoy it, but I'm actually liking it a lot more than I thought I would. So I'm also leaning towards like maybe I would enjoy maybe working with a whole team over than just an individual. So I'm still kind of figuring all that out, and just as I go on, the more experience I get, I'm just kind of trying to figure out which exactly direction I want to go down. But just keeping things open and being open to any ideas, really.
Yeah, I think that there's a big difference between like online training. Well, I shouldn't say that, but like enjoyability is kind of what I'm referring to. Like training somebody in the gym and like not necessarily being a personal trainer, but like having a group of clients that you actually train in the gym, whether or not like you're contracting yourself out. So like if you like were training at a gym and you had like 4 clients there and you take them through the workouts, you put them through that, and then you got the online component where it's like, all right, we're going to do 4 workouts a week, and I'll go to the workouts with you. We'll do those, and then we'll have our check-ins, and then we'll. So I think that like that is something that like it's the missing component with online training, because like you can still get people results, and people are like, as long as they're committed to their goals, it's all good. But like actually going in, like you said, and making that conversation and having that like interaction instead of just like sitting home all day and like still doing the job and still getting people results, but like just being able to go in there and watch people train and like watching people go through your workouts and like making sure their form is good, and like you know what I mean, like having that interaction I think is like irreplaceable.
Absolutely, man. No,
So
I agree 100%. And that's just how I feel. So just to kind of further that answer that question is not 100% sure, because like I said, I really do love the online training and the flexibility of working for yourself, working at home, and having your job come from just a laptop is pretty amazing. And I'm not saying anything bad about that, because I really do love it. But like I said, I just haven't fully figured out in terms of what I'm going to enjoy most. But like I said, I think in an ideal world, having kind of a mix of both, where it's not okay, maybe a full-time 9 to 5 job, but maybe I can work kind of hours around half the day, and then half my day be committed to my fully online clients or something along that line, is kind of what I would see myself going down ideally if it worked out like that.
yeah, so in terms of like the online coaching, when you started it, was it something that you tried to start or that you started before you kind of like got your pro card, or was it something that kind of was an opportunity that presented itself like after you got your pro card? Like how did that kind of work? Did you find that like you had clients beforehand and then you got more clients after you got your pro card, or was it something that just like you got your pro card and then lots more clients and opportunities started presenting themselves because people obviously realized, you know what I mean, that you can get results and you've got results and you've kind of like, I guess, proven yourself.
Yeah.
So how did that kind of work for like starting the business? Was it something you did before, or was it something that was ongoing?
Yeah, man. So absolutely. So um, basically how it all started happening, I think, is kind of common with a lot of people. I guess the more I got into the gym and fitness, and as I was preparing for competitions, like people started to recognize me in the gym, within my friend group who weren't necessarily all into fitness and everything like that. I was just kind of known as, the fitness guy. Like, hey, Breton, man, like, can you send me a workout plan? Like, I know you're getting results. Like, can you help me out? So I helped out, family members, like dozens of friends, or just people, acquaintances that I knew, just sending me messages like, "Can you help me out with this? Can you send me a workout plan for that?" And I was doing that forever because I really enjoyed it. And obviously, I wasn't charging anyone. I was just doing everything for free because I solely enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And then that was back after just after my first competition, like 2016, 2017. Working with Patty, that's when I really opened up my eyes, as like when online coaching started to really kind of blow up, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So then I was like, oh shit, you know what I mean? Like I could charge money for this. Like there's certain ways I could like build a business platform, and like, you know what I mean? And as I worked with Patrick, like I said, he kind of took me under his wing. He was a great mentor for me in terms of explaining to me why he did the things he did with me, why we did the weekly check-ins, certain adjustments he would make for me, and then obviously me, taking my certifications, taking kinesiology, all these different things. My level of education was continuously increasing, and I just became more and more confident of what I could provide for a client or anyone that I worked with. So once I felt, pretty solidified and pretty comfortable with the information and knowledge that I had, then I was ready and now prepared to start charging for my service rather than just offering it for free. So it definitely started off slow. I remember I had like 2 clients probably for the first few months, and that's how things went. And then as I started prepping for my Muscle Mayhem show, just obviously, people see you getting leaner, and you can post the off season to your transformation picture. Things started to pick up a little bit, getting into 5, 6, 7 clients, stuff like that. And then yeah, definitely when I won my pro card, I remember right after I won my pro card, I had like 4 emails right the next day from like people actually in the United States who want to work with me, who just kind of seen me from different Instagram posts or whatever it may be. So yeah, 100% that the pro card definitely did help me out in gaining clients and getting more attention and attraction from people. But it was just kind of a slow process in terms of beginning picking up clients and stuff, like I said, when I was comfortable with the knowledge and the service that I could provide.
So you feel like the pro card kind of did the marketing for itself?
Yeah.
I guess. But when you started getting going, was it something that like you mentioned you only had a few clients? So was it something that did you ever like market your service, or was it just kind of like you'd get messages and people would be interested, and then you kind of felt, like you said, more confident being able to say, you know what, I can charge for this. Like here's what it, like people reaching out to you and you being like, here's what I can offer you, or was it something that like you had to at the start? Is kind of what I'm saying. Like, was it something you had to go out and say, you know what, I need to look for some people,
Right.
or how did it?
So it kind of worked with when I first got the idea in my head. Actually, I should say actually so I did it for free, but I had the idea in my head when I was working with Patrick in 2016, when I seen what he was doing as an online coach and what you could achieve. I had it in the back of my mind, like, you know what, that would be sweet to be something to work towards. So as I knew that that was a goal of mine, what I did was just I made my Instagram. So I made my personal Instagram into a fitness account. So what I tried to do was just provide constant, consistent evidence or information, helpful content, anything along those lines, just consistently, every day or every second day for weeks and weeks and months until I have a year's or 2 years worth of content over hundreds of posts that are providing a lot of value from people. And then that kind of set myself up into, after all these posts, I kind of announced, hey, now I'm taking on clients for online training. And it's like, oh, does this guy knows what he's doing? Well, he has hundreds of posts describing all these different nutrition and training principles. I'm probably going to trust him a little bit more than just a guy with 3 posts who says, oh, I'm a certified fitness coach or whatever. You know what I mean? So what I really tried to do was establish a name for myself locally and just kind of on social media for the most part, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So just one question to close that up. I think that makes absolute sense. So for people that are new to online training or looking to become a fitness coach, or someone that's maybe struggling getting clients, what would you say should be their number one priority, or what kind of things would you kind of advice you would give them for getting into the field, whether or not that be like, let's say they're similar to me and you, where they have goals that they want to with their pro card, but they also want to like balance that with education. Like what kind of steps would you say what would be your advice, I guess you'd say, for someone who's trying to do that?
Yeah, so for one, I learned an absolute ridiculous amount of information for myself from listening to podcasts. Listening to people on your free time, whether it's doing cardio, driving in the car, listening to people like 3DMJ, Mike Israetel, like people through Revive Stronger, all these big established people who are obviously very intelligent with their PhDs and all these other things, listening to them and like learning and teaching yourself and not just waiting for the information to randomly come for you. So putting in the effort to actually educate yourself and know what you're talking about. And then, like I said, just being consistent and putting out helpful content, not just posting a shirtless selfie every day of your abs with a couple emojis or something like that. Like actually showing people that you know what you're talking about and that you want to help them, and you're giving tips and you're giving advice, you're staying consistent. You know, you're talking on your Instagram stories, you're interacting with people online, you're following different people, you're commenting on people's posts, and you're just literally trying to put in the effort to get your name out there, interact with as many people that are people that you look up to. You know, like I know I look up to people like the Jeff Nippards and all those people in the industry, so I try and associate myself with them, tag them in posts, comment on their posts, just all of those things, surrounding yourself with people who you want to be like or who you look up to, and just like I said, creating useful content. And as I mentioned, how I started out, providing free value to people, not just trying to charge people your first month after you have this idea of being a coach. Give free workout programs to your friends and family. Get those results first before you ever think about charging someone for something that you don't even know you can accomplish. And just building that confidence in yourself over time. And like I said, just providing as much useful content as you can to people, just to help out as many people as possible. Like I said, just establish your name in the industry or locally or whatever that is to you, before you can build things up to a level of charging people for your service, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I think that like brings us into the next point that I kind of want to discuss on just very briefly. But like, I think that the word online coach, it's like that should be taken like literally. Like, if you're going to be online, like you have to have a presence like online. Like that's the whole idea. Like you're not. It's like if you're a personal trainer or whatever, like you're going to the gym, you're meeting everybody. Like you don't need an online account because you're going into the gym every day, and there could be new members, there could be people that are watching you. Like if you work at a gym or something, like you're attracting clients from actually physically going to that location. But every moment you open up your phone and you go on Instagram, it's like there's your gym, right? Like there's the clients, there's your opportunities, there's like a potential opportunity to be able to put out something that somebody sees where they're like, holy shit, that was a 7-week transformation, or that's a good tip, or this is like 3 tips for bulking or whatever. So I think that like it's just like and people like slowly start to feed off that. So like God knows who's reading your post, who like, you know what I mean, might stumble upon that and like creep you for like, because I know personally there's people that like will creep you for like 3 weeks or something, and they'll just watch your post, and then eventually they're like, you know what, I'm actually going to send this person a message because like, you know what I mean, I've been following this guy for a little bit, and I think he kind of has like some people are like more meticulous with their actions, so it's like I think being consistent. So that's kind of something I want to move into right now with the whole social media thing. How important do you think it is to be consistent with like Instagram or some type of platform that you're doing, just in general for fitness? And like, I guess consistency being like, I think everybody treats that different. Like if you're doing a story or doing an ab shot, but like from what you mentioned, I think like the consistency that I want to talk about is like bringing out a good message and like sharing some valuable information. So for you, like how important do you feel like that is on social media?
Yeah, man, I think that is massively important. And I think it's also important to realize who your target audience is and who you're trying to attract as a client. So I've learned that throughout the process of my social media as well, going from, very general tips, just to say, oh, how to lose 5 pounds by cutting out sugary drinks and drinking more water and stuff like that. Well, some of those tips maybe aren't going to attract a competitor, rather than talking about periodization in your training or peak week manipulations. Like those kind of posts are going to attract a certain kind of clientele and a certain kind of target audience. So I think it's important to put out content that you're essentially trying to attract of that clientele basis or that target market, if that makes sense. Like, and just being consistent, like I said, in terms of, for me, I remember there was a time I'm a little bit I'm still pretty consistent with things. It's a little bit more difficult with school, but for me, a huge goal of mine in the past, and I was really good with it, was a post a day and, maybe 5 stories a day with regards to, okay, I'm going to make a post today about my training, maybe a post tomorrow about nutrition, maybe a post tomorrow about my prep updates or my off-season updates, and just having like different patterns of different things that I want to include or give content or information about, and then doing the same kind of things on my stories, like, oh, here's a pre-workout meal of mine. I enjoy eating this type of food an hour before I work out because it's low in fat, it digests quickly, and there's high protein and high carbs to help fuel me through my workout, or something like that. Just anything that is good, useful content that is targeted towards the people that you're trying to attract, essentially, if that kind of answers.
Absolutely. So with your Instagram, like, do you see? I kind of put a lot of my attention towards like YouTube. So for me, it's like kind of the content that for me, I like it for a couple of reasons. Like it's I wouldn't say it's more creative, but like I'm able to like kind of put together something. So I'm able to do like a full video where it's like, guys, here's what the video is, here's some cool edits, so for me, it's like the enjoyability factor of being able to actually put out like a good video on like a specific topic. So for you, like, do you feel like YouTube's something that I noticed, I don't think you have a YouTube channel, but
No,
would YouTube be something that, like, when you get a little bit more free time, or I guess like what I should say is like, I guess what's holding you back from not having a YouTube channel?
Right. Yeah. So I think the main one is kind of definitely right now is definitely time. So for me, like I do, there's about 3 or 4 days a week right now where I'm, waking up at like 6 in the morning, training a couple different sports teams till about 8 or 9, and then I have class from 9 or 10 till, if that want to be 4 or something throughout the day. Then I got to get my own training, and then I got homework and blah blah blah. So I know that the lifestyle that I've been living for the past few years and I'm currently living, YouTube probably isn't the best bang for my buck. Another reason is because I'm not very good with a lot of technology, unfortunately. Like the whole editing and all that stuff, honestly, I'm really not good at that at all. And I think for me to produce a video would take me a ridiculous amount of time. So for me, just in terms of efficiency and reaching people as quickly and as accurately as possible, the best way I can seems to be through Instagram, because I can, type up a caption or put some ideas on a story of me talking or whatever it may be. I can just do that a lot more quickly and get it out there, rather than it being a long process for me that I may not necessarily have time for at this time. But I've definitely thought about starting a YouTube channel, man, 100%. And I'd be lying if it's saying that it's something I didn't want to do, because I definitely would love to in the future. I think it's just something that I got to learn a little bit more about. I got to learn how to edit and get the right software and all that stuff, and just getting a groove with that.
Because that was one of the biggest things holding me back too. Was the not necessarily the creative process, because like I'm pretty decently good with like creativity. Like I'm able to like say, okay, like I'm gonna go like I'm a solo creator, but I've recently started like reaching out to other people to help me. So like I'll have some people film my workouts or like things or do some stuff, but like that happened over time. But for me to be like, okay, like I want this clip here, I want this pull down to be, you know what I mean, like, but like that almost takes away from the workout, because I've noticed that there's be times where I'd go to the gym twice a day. It'd be like I'd go to the gym in the morning to actually work out, and then I'd go film the content, or I would like mix in the workout and the content, and then the workout would suffer or the content would suffer, because like I was too focused on one. So that was always a struggle. But like I was in the same boat where it was like not knowing how to do things, and like editing a video, like for example this podcast, like it's going to take me at least whatever the long of the podcast is to edit it, and then I put my podcast on YouTube, but I also upload them on Spotify as well. But like so to do that, like eventually, like I think I cut it down so much, but it took me so long to like learn editing, to learn all that, and like I 100% think it's worth it. Like it was something that, like, looking back now, it was like I don't know how I stuck with it, because I've been consistent with it now for like I want to say like a little over a year, where I'm posting like I was posting 3 times a week on YouTube. Now I'm posting twice a week. So it was like something where it was like I set a goal for myself and I did it. But I think that like it's a huge learning curve. But yeah, that's just kind of like my spiel on it. But it definitely like it's like just get an easy editing software, like Filmora is the one that I use. Nothing fancy, and literally just pick away at it.
Right. Yeah. No. Absolutely.
But I totally understand what you're saying though with the time, because it's definitely the most time consuming, and it's not the best turnover. Like the algorithm's not that great. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But you have to think of YouTube like Instagram. The way that I think about it, it's like a quick hit, right? Like
Right.
you post something on Instagram, it gets likes, it gets views, it gets comments. Like it's pretty bang bang bang. Whereas like YouTube, like you might post a video and then it does really shitty, but you thought it was like your best video. And then
Yeah.
you post like a shitty video and it's like, why the hell did that do good? And then you're going through like months and months of like 24 views, 30 views. And then next thing you know, you post a video, it's like 1,000 views and you're like, holy shit. So it's like, you almost can't look at the numbers. You've honestly, like, I think the message that I'm trying to get at is just like, wherever you're posting your content, I think the biggest thing is to be like real with it, like really believe in, like, don't just put out the 5 best because you want to put out a video on the 5 best chest exercises. Don't put out a video on weight loss tips if like you don't believe in them. I think that's the biggest thing is like wherever you post content, just be like consistent with it and like put out like deliver a message. And I think the one thing that I learned was something you mentioned was with like be specific on who you're trying to target. So
Yeah.
like don't just try to target everybody, like try to be like specific, like really niche down. Like it might seem harder at first, like I feel like, because like you're trying to reach a certain group of people, and if that person doesn't fit into that video, like if somebody isn't a competitor and they're not doing a peak week, you know what I mean, and then like they might not care. But like that's something that like you have to figure out yourself. Like those are the kind of clients I want to work with. Those are the kind of people that I have to reach. If it takes me a little bit longer to reach those people, in the end, I'm going to be happy because I'm going to be narrowing down to exactly what I want to do. So I think that was kind of like the biggest thing was just like making sure that you're honest with your message and whatever kind of content you put out. Like I feel like that's something I learned along the lines was just like I'd put out videos, I'd put out content. Not that I didn't believe in it, but it was more generic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was just kind of my little spiel on that.
No, absolutely, man. Totally agree with you 100%.
So I just want to move into a couple other topics before we wrap it up.
Yep.
Want to touch on just a little bit of nutrition because I feel like that's important as well. So everybody's always talking about supplements. I just want to like get your take on like supplements. Like what if you could only, I don't know what current supplements you use right now, but like if you could only use 3 supplements, maybe you only use 3 right now, like which supplements would you say are probably your best bang for your buck, given the fact that like your goal is building muscle and you are training like consistently?
Right. Yeah, absolutely, man. So one creatine monohydrate, 5 grams a day. No need to cycle on or off of it. None of that stuff. No loading phase, anything like that. So that is number one. I've taken creatine for probably the past 3 years straight now. Um,
Yep.
a protein powder doesn't need to be a certain brand or anything like that. Just a solid whey protein powder if you need that to reach your protein targets. If you can reach your protein targets through whole foods, that is awesome, and that's what I'd recommend. But for me personally, I'm not able to do that sometimes, especially being a student. So, having a 2-scoop protein shake after the gym to kind of reach my targets is super convenient. So those are 2, and then 3. You know what? I'm a pretty big pre-workout guy right now. I definitely like having my caffeine and stuff before the gym. So for me personally, I like that. But then the only other things I would say is anything that you're just like deficient in. If you're not getting enough, vitamin D through your diet or whatever it may be that you think you're lacking in. Like a lot of people don't get enough fish in their diet, stuff like that. So like a fish oil pill, omega-3 or omega-6 or whatever it may be. Anything like that is what I would recommend. But I would say the most stuff that people hype up and the most popular stuff is mostly garbage, like the fat burners, the BCAAs. Like I'm not a fan of any of that stuff. I don't take any of that stuff. So pretty much what I take. So my daily routine would be a usually protein powder most days if I do need to hit or need assistance for hitting that protein target. Creatine monohydrate, and then pre-workout most days, and then some days, well, I also do kind of supplement with like a vitamin D supplement and some multivitamins just to kind of make sure that I'm hitting those targets as well. Just sometimes because my diet may not always be the best if I'm on the go and I'm kind of grabbing quick things. I just try to incorporate that just to make sure kind of I'm checking those boxes.
Yeah, I would say I'm the exact same thing. I'd probably do a protein powder. I'd do a creatine for sure,
Yep.
and I do a fish oil and a multivitamin.
Yep.
Those are my 3 pre-workout. I could definitely see. yeah, like I like for me, it's like a cup of coffee, yeah, maybe, but like I would say if you have the money, definitely a pre-workout because it can
Yeah,
definitely help. And I would like for someone who's busy and like you're going to school and you have a bunch of stuff going on, like there are days that like for me, even if you're working, like whoever you are, like there's
yeah,
days where you just don't want to go to the gym and like if you've got
absolutely.
that pre-workout, like if you can convince yourself to take a sip of the pre-workout, I guarantee you're gonna get I've been like putting the gym off, like just to kind of give you a funny story. Like I used to put the gym off sometimes. Like I went through a motivation stage where I was just like, shit, I got to go to the gym. And then next thing you know, look at the clock. It's the afternoon. I got to go to the gym. It's like
Yeah,
5 o'clock. You know what I mean? I still got to go to the gym. And then like it would be like around 11 p.m. and I'd be like, I feel so guilty for not going to the gym that I would like mix up pre-workout, hit the gym. I'd go to the gym for like 12:30. You know what I mean? I had nothing. I had like nothing going, or I had nothing going on that day. I'd be at the gym at 1 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean? It
geez,
just
yeah,
because like I just feel guilty about it. End up taking pre workout. Next thing you know, like I'm psyched up, ready to go.
yeah, that's
So
hilarious.
like yeah, that's just kind of like a funny thing. I used to do that all the time, just like procrastination. And then
Oh,
next thing you know, I'd dive into the pre workout, and I just it would be the best thing that would get me going. I would
yeah,
just get in my car in like 3 minutes and drive like 75 to the gym and show up and be like ready to rock a workout when like all day I was like, oh god,
yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
want to do
Yeah. So I
that.
do. I should just say too, though, but just like you said, absolutely. Pre workout, I definitely don't think is necessary. It's just a personal product that I do enjoy to take. But like you said, a cup of coffee, you want to take some caffeine pills; those are cheap. Or if you don't need that for extra energy, then that's awesome. But yeah, just for me, just being busy and on the go, sometimes it can just be a nice energy boost before the gym. Absolutely.
Yes. So one more nutrition question, then we'll move into the closing questions.
Perfect.
So with your nutritional strategy, just generally, I guess from like where you started, I kind of want to make this like an encompassing question. Like you mentioned that you're type 1 diabetic,
Yep.
and then like that probably alters your approach to nutrition, or maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But like based on like how you started training and like to where you are now, and from like getting your pro card to like training now to kind of be better than you were when you got your pro card. I guess like everything in summary, like how has your approach to nutrition changed overall? Like, is it something I'll kind of give it some hints or something? Like, is it something like you mentioned before where it's like going over the casual beer with your friends or just enjoying a night out and going to wings and like making sure like you're able to fit that into your macros? Or is it something where it's like, you know what, I need to meal prep? Like meal prepping for me is essential. Like if I don't meal prep, like I'd rather eat like 3 or 4 day old food because I know I'm actually going to eat it. You know what I mean? Like as bad as it tastes, if I have that food in the fridge, I'm definitely going to eat it. So for me, it's like I know when I'm struggling with my nutrition. For me, it's always meal prepping. So is there something that like has changed and evolved, and you've kind of like found out what worked for you with your nutrition that over the course of like being like finding out you're diabetic to when you started training seriously to like managing that, but also trying to take your training to the next level.
Yeah, so I guess it's just being consistent with my food selection and food choices, knowing which foods I enjoy and what's in the foods itself, like knowing just basically what I'm trying to say as I become more experienced, the more I've been doing this, now I can, I know how much protein is in, a 5 ounce chicken breast. I know these certain different factors or how much carbs is in, a cup of rice and stuff like that. So just being consistent, like you said, meal prepping is definitely essential for me. I'm a big one. I like to like I always prep my protein sources, so I
Yeah.
just sure I always have a bunch of cooked chicken breasts in the fridge or ground beef or whatever it may be for the week. And then I'll
Mhm.
kind of do the same thing. It might be some rice, or I'll just do minute rice or whatever it is, a quick, easy carb source. But it's just staying consistent with that. I really like to make sure that I have like a really good breakfast, lunch, and supper, all with like a nice bolus of protein in there, nice mixture of fats and carbs to get 3 solid meals in, and then I'll also just make sure to have some snacks throughout the day. But yeah, for me being diabetic, it's more or less like eating majority of like complex carbs, wheat breads, certain things that
Regulate the blood, yeah, the levels, so then they don't like
yes, so they don't spike
like
up
yeah.
as much. And just being aware, obviously, of my blood sugar levels and the foods that I'm eating and stuff like that. But it's more or less just as my experience has evolved over these past few years, it's being able to have the I guess the dedication or the self discipline of actually going through with my meal preps and like you said, eating the food in my fridge. Whereas, a year or two ago or whatever, or a couple years ago, whenever it may be, I may not meal prep for a week, so I'll just eat out for the week, or I would eat, shittier foods for the week and stuff like that. It's more or less just me being on top of things, kind of being, just being like, just making sure that I'm doing the things I need to do in the run of the day. If that's like going to the grocery store and not buying shitty foods to have in my cupboard because I know that I'm going to eat it, just being more self-aware of that stuff, having better snacks in my house instead of having, chocolate covered granola bars and Fruity Pebbles cereal or something like that. Maybe it's some, more like oatmeal or more Greek yogurt and different fruit sources and just stuff like that that I know is not only going to be beneficial for me for my physique, but also my health as a type 1 diabetic.
Yeah, and I think that like I think you brought up a good point. Like things that you can reach for. Like for me, Greek yogurt's a huge staple in my diet because like it's something that I don't have to cook, and it's something that I can just get an easy source of protein. I can put some protein powder in there, and I've got like 50 grams of protein. You know what I mean? Like if I so for me, it's always something that I'm able to just like have. So I think that like giving yourself options where it's like you're not always going to want to cook chicken breast. So like buying foods that are higher in protein that necessarily aren't maybe like the best protein sources, but
Yep.
like they're still decently good protein sources and they're better than like going full on with a bag of ketchup chips or something like that just because you're like you get home from the gym and you're like holy shit, like I'm hungry, I don't
Yep.
got chicken cooked, I'll make this one exception where I'll, you know what I mean, eat whatever this leftover thing is in this box here.
Yeah.
So it's just like
Absolutely, man.
just having stuff available for when you need it.
Exactly.
I think it's making sure like you understand that about yourself because I've learned that over the years. Like with me, just like if there's something there, I'm going to eat it. So like making sure I'm buying foods and I'm if I have to cut up the fruits before I eat them, like I found that was the biggest thing was just like just making sure everything is done so like it's there, it's the easiest it possibly can be, and there's absolutely no excuses.
Yeah, yeah,
So
and just to add on to that too, it's just more like for me, one of the I was kind of looking for is having more self-discipline. So a couple years ago, if I were to wake up and I wasn't really feeling hungry, I was kind of on the go. I was like, oh, well, I'm not gonna eat. I'll just eat later. Now it's like, okay, I make sure that I wake up early enough so that I can eat and I can get some food in me when I need it, and just having that kind of self-discipline to do the things I need to do that are going to progress my physique and get me to the goals that I want to reach, essentially.
I do have one specific thing that I want to talk about this. So just because this kind of just came to my mind right now. So with like pre-workout and post-workout nutrition, do you obviously like from my understanding, it's like as long as you have like one, if you have a good pre-workout meal, then like your post-workout meal becomes it's not important, but it's not as important. Or if like you don't have a good pre-workout meal, as long as you get a good fast-acting carb or protein into you after your workout, then ideally at the end of the day, the only thing that should matter is your protein intake and your calories.
Yeah.
But the approach that I kind of want to take on this is the fact of like fasted training. The reason why I brought it up is because I know it's very specific, but like somebody who wants, like, I'll think of an example for me. Like I found that like working out in the mornings is great for me because like I'm able to get up, I'm able to go, I'm able to get my workout. I wouldn't want to classify it as out of the way, but it's probably one of the best feelings like I've experienced. It's just like getting up and doing that morning workout, giving it all you have, feeling like you had a productive session, and coming home and it being like 9 o'clock, and you're like, I've got the whole day, right?
Right.
So basically, what I'm trying to say is like I started doing that, and I found myself like not wanting to wake up any earlier to eat.
Right.
So it was like I was like, let's say I was going to the gym for like I don't know 8 o'clock. I
Yep.
didn't want to eat because of two reasons. Because I'm cutting, so like I'm on lower calories. So eating would require calories to be spent in the morning.
Yep.
Whereas if I just push those calories to after my workout, I would be working out at 8. I'd get home at like 10:30. My first meal would be at 10:30, and it
Yep.
would make hitting the calories much more manageable versus having that meal. So I just kind of want to get your like thoughts on if somebody was like fasted training. Do you feel like there's like it's bad to like not have something before you eat and you train fasted? even if you get that workout meal in, or kind of like how would you say, like, what are your thoughts on that whole
So,
situation?
in my opinion, just like you said, so number one, adherence is going to be most important. It doesn't matter what's going to be most optimal, because what is more optimal is definitely eating before the gym. It's going to improve your performance and stuff like that. And you want, if you like, it's a good idea to stimulate muscle protein synthesis through getting like 25 plus grams of protein before you do train. That's definitely not a bad idea, and I would
Yeah.
recommend it. But in the end of the day, if doing that is reducing your calories that you can consume throughout the day, and then you end up continuously going over that target, well, then that's not doing you any good, right? So in my opinion, it's whatever you can stick to and whatever you enjoy the most. If having that pre-workout meal would normally, maybe improve your performance and your recovery by like 5%, well, that 5% or 4% or whatever it may be isn't going to be significant in the grand scheme of things if you're constantly falling off track.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes sense. And I was like, that was something that I was like, I knew about, but for me, it was something that I was like, I don't really feel it was more of a calorie thing because if I was bulking,
Yeah.
obviously I would have way more calories to play with. So it was something that I was like, well, I don't really feel like burning. Like, I'd say breakfast is probably my biggest meal.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like it's a good start of the day. Like I need something where it's like maybe 650 calories. And
Yeah.
right now I'm currently dieting on like 2200.
Yeah.
Started adding in some cardio, so that's been helping. But I'm trying to get down. I got a specific goal that I'm trying to get down before I actually start building back up. So I'm basically just trying. So I was like, you know what? I'll do the morning workouts. I'll do like, but for me, it was like I started eating before, and it wasn't getting the food down. That was easy. Like getting the food down is no problem. I can eat at like 5 in the morning if I had to. But it was
Yeah.
more about calorie sparing, just like making sure that like I had enough calories allocated. So one last thing on this. So like even though they say that as long as like we just went over the post workout and the pre workout meal, do you still plan the majority like bulking or cutting? Would you say it's 100% way more beneficial to plan your calories around your training versus like at the end of the day, net calories is what's going to be, it's going to be either a surplus or a deficit.
Yeah.
But do you feel like there's actually something to just saying, you know what, well, when am I training today? Okay, well, let's shift those calories to there. Like, do you think that there's something to that?
Yeah, I do. I personally do think it's fairly important, especially the leaner you get in, say, a competition prep. If you're really on lower calories, your recovery is already affected, your performance is getting majorly affected. Structuring those calories, especially carbohydrates and protein, around pre and post workout, I think is definitely going to be beneficial, like I said, for your performance and recovery. A little bit less important when you're in a surplus of calories and you have all this extra energy around. You have extra carbs floating around in your system. You got your all kinds of glycogen. You don't have to worry about being depleted or anything like that. I think it's probably a little
Yeah.
bit less important. But yeah, no, I personally do think it is fairly important. It can play a pretty major role in things. And what I like to do for both my pre and post workout meal is make sure that I'm having a fairly high amount of carbs and protein and a fairly low amount of fiber and fats, just so I can digest that food quickly, both before and after my workout, to kind of start that recovery process as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. So now I just kind of want to move into some closing questions. I always kind of like to add some closing questions just so that we kind of not summarize, but just to kind of get your opinions on some other things. So for someone who's trying to get into online fitness coaching, or not online fitness coaching, sorry, natural pro card. So someone who's looking to win their natural pro card,
Yep.
what would you say, like from where you started to like where you're at now, looking back, like what kind of a piece of advice would you have for somebody who's like looking to get their pro card, doing it not necessarily doing the way that you would do, but some of like the takeaways that you know what, like that really helped for me getting my pro card? Was it like sticking to like a structured training program? Was it literally just like consistently grinding for 3 years before stepping on stage? Or was it maybe doing that first show and not placing great, and then that got the fire going to kind of say, you know what, like, or maybe it could have been like working with Pat or like having like a support system. Like,
Right.
what would you say somebody who's like trying to get into to win their pro card? Like, what would you say would be your biggest piece of advice for someone looking to looking to do that?
Yeah, so I think patience and education. So not if it's either self-educating or coach, like the biggest one. If you don't really know what you're doing, or it doesn't even matter if you do know what you're doing, having a coach to steer you in the right direction and actually set up a game plan for you is so important and so overlooked. So many people will go out and spend hundreds of dollars on all the fat burning supplements, the new shoes, the Gymshark swag, all that stuff, but yet they won't spend 100 or 200 or whatever dollars a month on a coach that's actually going to help them get the results they want. So investing in the right things is going to be huge, and also just having patience. I mean, I know I'm in a unique example because I got extremely lucky and I won my pro card my second ever competition. But another analogy I like from, I think it was someone in 3DMJ team, they said it like a lot of people, they go, I just want to compete in this show and win my pro card. And the analogy they said was like, a lot of people don't say, I'm going to go try on some skates and play hockey because I want to make it to the NHL. Like, it doesn't really work like that. You're not just going to jump into something like that. It takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, a lot of hard work and dedication, and actually just setting up a game plan, having an idea of what you're doing, not just mindlessly throwing weight around and eating whatever you want, just understanding what you're doing and kind of meticulously working towards that goal, setting short-term goals, setting long-term goals. And in my personal opinion, I think having a knowledgeable coach who knows what they're doing and can take care of you is one of the number one things. Definitely, man, definitely.
Absolutely, I would totally agree. And coming from somebody who's not getting coaching now, I can totally relate because, like I mentioned before, with the check-ins, that's probably the hardest part. But for someone definitely looking to like get into it, like for sure, online coaching, I learned so much just from it. Helped my own, like me coaching other people. Do you know what I mean? Because I learned from those coaches, and I was like, you know what, this is what Derek does. This is what Pat does.
Yep.
This is what I'm going to do. You know what I mean? This is, and then like the knowledge that they shared where they're like, they did their training, like Derek did their training differently than Pat did. Pat did his nutrition differently than, so it's like, but like at the end of the day, it was all related to me. So like it allowed me to understand my body. So then it got me to understand that like not everybody's the same and not everybody's going to be able to respond. Like I could offer somebody a program that responded good to me, but like it's not necessarily going to translate to you. You know what I mean? So I think that having that understanding and being so specific and having that experience in dealing with other people will translate into like improving your own knowledge for sure.
100%, exactly.
Yeah. So just with one last question before the closing question that I want to ask. But so with motivation now with like COVID and everyone kind of like, I know when I first started going back to the gym, I was surprised. Like I thought it would be like Walmart. Like I thought everyone would be lined up and like ready to go and stuff. Like I went back to the gym like the day they opened in June, and I was like, what the hell? Like why isn't there, like there was very minimal amount of people there. And I'm assuming that's probably, it's not necessarily motivation related. It's probably because they didn't feel comfortable going with like COVID or whatever. But now that I guess things are, I want to say kind of like on the come up, there might be people that are not feeling as motivated as they were beforehand. So kind of in your situation, like I don't want to relate to those people because everybody's different, but like in your situation, obviously you probably go through times where you're not feeling motivated. What do you feel is the biggest thing that like when you get in a slump or you get in a thing where, like you mentioned, where you eat like 3 days of like chicken fingers and KD or whatever it is, then you find yourself like not sticking to your workouts. Like, what do you find is like the biggest thing that motivates you to get you back on track, just in general?
Honestly, man, it's realizing where I am and where I want to be, and realizing that if you solely rely on motivation, you're not going to go that far because motivation comes and goes. It's up and down. It comes down to that self-discipline and doing the shit that you don't necessarily want to do. Do you want to eat that chicken and rice sometimes, or do you want to wake up at 5 if that's the only time in the morning you can get that training session in? Like, no, not all the times you do. But if you realize that, like, listen, I have these really big, lofty goals, and I'm not gonna get there without hard work. I think you just always have to look back kind of at yourself, realize what you're trying to achieve, and realize there's absolutely times where motivation for me is like this. Some days I'm dragging my ass to the gym. Some days I can't wait. Luckily enough, most days I'm super motivated. But it's just realizing that, it's all self-discipline. Absolutely, man. It's just sticking to what you want to do, and just like I said, just realizing that sometimes you got to sacrifice certain things if you want to achieve those goals you have set for yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that for me, it was like I always felt like super guilty about not working out. And then like I would go and work out and it would be like the best, it would literally be the best workout ever because you've probably got that like post workout high where you're like, I thought today was going to suck. And then you go into the gym and you crush it and you're like, holy shit, now I want to crush the rest of the week. It's like, that's kind of some of the workouts I've always, so for me, it's always thinking like, you're going to regret this. Like, this is only like a temporary feeling. Like you mentioned, like nobody wants to get up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. and like do post-workout or do their cardio or do whatever they like game plan that they have, or like get their workout in if they got a busy day. But like at the end of the day, would you be happy like knowing that you didn't give it your all? Is kind of like my thing. It's like, I always just like, yeah, like I always just think back and you know what, like you got to make the most of every single day. And like, I know at the end of the day, I'm going to be happier getting that workout in than if I don't get that workout in. And I think that like the biggest thing is being able to separate like your feelings from like what you actually want, because like they're two different things. So like if you can put your feelings aside and like literally just keep a blank space up in your brain and like grab your gym bag and get to the car, like I find that that's the biggest thing. It's just like fighting your feelings, because like I know personally for me, it's like I don't it, like in the winter it's terrible. Like you're freezing, you're cold, like you don't, the last thing you want to do is like sometimes go to the gym. But I think that like being numb just like in your mind and just having that goal and understanding that like it's not in your best interest to not go to the gym. Like you just have to have that like ability to understand that like this is what you want. And I think a lot of people are like back and forth between like, I want to win my pro card, I don't want to work out, I want to win my pro card, I don't want to work out. And then it's like they're never really consistent with doing like one thing. Whereas it's like if they were just to focus on like one thing and say, okay, well, this week I want to get my workouts in, this week I want to stick to my training, this week I want to not cheat on my diet. I think that like making those small term goals and just like disregarding your feelings is like the biggest thing that I have found, just to like you said, keeping your goals and like understanding like your goals are the most important, and like you're not going to allow one day of just like crap to kind of impact it. But I found like that was probably the biggest thing for me, is just to like neglect my feelings and just do it, because I know how good I'm going to feel. I'm going to feel 10 times better after. Like as shitty as I feel when I don't want to go, I'm going to feel 10 times better after that I did it.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely, man. Couldn't agree more.
so just kind of how I end every podcast. Do you have anything that you'd like to add? Any last words that you'd like to share just for my viewers?
Honestly, no. What I like to say is thank you very much for having me on, man. I think it was a great conversation. Really enjoyed the discussion we had today. Hopefully, I can provide some value to your viewers. And I guess the only thing I would say is if you guys or anyone listening that wants to check me out on social media, my Instagram profile is Breton McNeil. Simple as that. If you want to check me out there.
Perfect. I'll link it in the description, and I'll also put it on the screen. I always kind of like link it at the start as well, so they're able to go. But yeah, that's awesome, man. I really do appreciate it. And how I conclude every podcast is don't forget to be inspiring, stay motivated, and continue to push your limits.